Welcome to my channel. Today I'll show you titles. The Tailor 2023 is a Turkish series. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. A well-known young tailor and designer is getting ready for his fashion show when the series opens. He goes by the name Peyami Dokumusai. Susie, one of his assistants, assists him every day. Peyami survived the fashion presentation despite the actions of his best friend Dimitri. Before the models turn on the runway, Dimitri had sex with her, which deeply worried Peyami and Susie. But since the show was a hit, everyone still enjoyed themselves. Dimitri, who snorted cocaine, was among them. But Susie arrived with some distressing news: Peyami's grandfather has passed away. This stopped Peyami from amusing the stone Dimitri. Peyami paid his homage by returning to his hometown. He met up with his mentally disabled father, Mustafa, there. Peyami had a difficult upbringing with Mustafa, especially when she was growing up. When he defended his father, the other kids would taunt, bully, and beat him. Peyami asked his grandfather to send him away from his father since things were so bad. After the family patriarch passed away, Peyami's grandmother insisted that Peyami take the entire family, including his father, to Istanbul. One of Peyami's duties upon his return was to take Dimitri's wedding suit sizes once more. Peyami had never met Esvet, the woman Dimitri is engaged to. Peyami wanted to make some changes because their wedding is so close, and she made Esvet's bridal gown. But Peyami was quickly denied the pleasure by Dimitri and his mother. They claim that it is customary for no guy to see the bride this close to the wedding day. As a result, Esvet was concealed by Esvet's veil and Peyami was left blindfolded. Susie assisted Peyami as he made the necessary marks for the dress alteration because he is a skilled tailor. They were unaware that throughout this time, Dimitri had been physically abusing Esvet. Esvet was almost smothered by being imprisoned in a chest when Dimitri brought her down. She was sobbing under the veil even as she was adjusting her clothes. They did not bring Mustafa's scarecrow to Istanbul, so he was having a fit at home. The family was ultimately forced to shackle his legs. Finding Mustafa's carer becomes more and more important. Peyami was thinking about Mustafa and something else as well. He looked through his grandfather's hidden box after his grandfather passed away to locate some papers and pictures of his mother. Kiraz Dokumachi is the name of his mother. A few days later, Peyami received a request to enter his living room since Mustafa's carer candidate was present. Esvet, who had assumed the identity of Firuze, eventually revealed herself to be the woman. Flashback to Esvet and Dimitri's engagement, which was planned by their parents. As soon as Dimitri revealed his true colors, Esvet begged her adoptive mother, Irini, to call off the engagement. Irini, however, refused. Esvet overheard Peyami's talk with Susie on the day that she arrived to take her measurements. She then realized that Peyami's home was a secure location to flee to. Presently, at Peyami's place, she assumes the part of Firuze and is brought to meet Mustafa. At the point when Mustafa originally looked at her, Esvet promptly helps him to remember his scarecrow, thus he embraces her and sings her his main tune, called Kiraz's Melody. Seeing this, Peyami employed her on the spot. Nonetheless, Peyami's grandma doesn't appear to be content with this recently added team member. In her eyes, Firuze should wed Mustafa as she will be the one dealing with all Mustafa's requirements, be it washing, food, or even sexual longings. Peyami, then again, doesn't have that as a main priority. At one point, Mustafa kept falling because his legs were chained. Therefore, Esvet demanded that Mustafa be freed from the chains. Peyami's grandmother was not pleased that she had made such a decision, but Peyami sided with Esvet and gave her the key. This angered Peyami's grandmother even more. Meanwhile, when Dimitri and his family find out about Esvet's disappearance, Dimitri acts like a child and starts smashing things in his house. Peyami ends up having to come because one of his assistants ruined Esvet's wedding dress. While he is there, Dimitri opens up to Peyami, saying that he truly loves Esvet and will not stop looking for her. During this time, Peyami's grandmother takes the opportunity to talk to Esvet. She tells Esvet that Esvet must marry Mustafa to get the job. This leaves Esvet in shock as she has just come out of a forced marriage. Now she finds herself in another person. Fortunately, when Peyami returned, Esvet approached him and told him about his concerns about his marriage to Mustafa. In response, Peyami declares that she doesn't need to marry Mustafa, which eventually calms Esvet. With Esvet already at her desk, Peyami persuaded her to try on one of her possible designs, a red halter dress. It's just a rag, but Peyami makes it work with pins. The hardest part for Esvet is seeing her wedding dress displayed beautifully in the dressing room, which makes her cringe as she relives painful memories. Peyami notices that she is staring at the dress and asks her to try it on. While Esvet is still mentally struggling to put on the dress, Mustafa appears and begins to play with the scissors. Peyami fears Mustafa will get hurt, but Mustafa can't stop. Esvet then changes back into her normal clothes and persuades Mustafa to stop. Escape the obligation of trying on a dress. On this working day, Dimitri comes to a meeting and then invites himself to lunch at Peyami's. With no other choice, Peyami gives Esvet clear instructions never to leave Mustafa as the guests will never see him. But when Esvet finally found out that Dimitri was the host, all hell broke loose. Dimitri took his parents and soon his in-laws to dinner and, as always, took care of the ass. Esvet lets Mustafa listen to the conversation and learns that her parents would be penniless if the engagement didn't go through. Although Peyami was a close friend, he couldn't stand Dimitri and took him out into the fresh air. Little did she know that Mustafa had already left and was nearby. When Esvet realizes that Mustafa is out in the garden, Mustafa has already introduced himself to Dimitri and Peyami. Esvet hides so as not to be seen by Dimitri, and luckily the second helper, Az, comes to the rescue. He claims Mustafa is his ailing brother, so Dimitri doesn't question Mustafa's identity. At the same time, Esvet's father, Faruk, notices Esvet there and tries to speak to him. However, she begs her father to keep it a secret, so Faruk goes home with Dimitri's family as usual. That night, after the guests returned home, Peyami yelled at Esvet for leaving Mustafa out of sight and sending her away. The next morning, Esvet leaves Peyami's house and calls her father. She wants to meet him in person to explain what's going on. But Dimitri overheard the entire conversation. When Esvet meets Faruk in the park, Dimitri appears out of nowhere and begins stalking Esvet. Esvet runs as fast as she can but is eventually cornered by Dimitri and his men. Although Esvet appears trapped, the back door of the building opens behind her. Without hesitation, she bursts into the building, prompting Dimitri to go after her again. But this time Esvet manages to lose him. Returns to Peyami's house, accepts Lady Sulhan's offer and marries Mustafa as Firuze. Peyami didn't find out until the next morning, but he wasn't told anything about the wedding. Meanwhile, Dimitri returns and takes out all his anger on Faruk. Faruk, of course, found several excuses to explain that he wanted to persuade Esvet to return. But this time even Dimitri's father could no longer resist Dimitri's incessant screams and chased his son away. In the morning Peyami comes to Dimitri to take him to a meeting. So Dimitri returns to his family. He spent the night outside adopting a stray dog he found in the park. With Peyami, Mustafa goes into Peyami's study again and causes a stir there. Esvet tries in many ways to get him away from there, but Mustafa refuses unless Esvet tries on the wedding dress hanging in the dressing room. This is of course Esvet's outfit. With no other choice, Esvet puts on a dressing gown and tries to drag it out of the room. Then Peyami enters the room and sees Firuze wearing Esvet's dress. When he pats her shoulder, he feels the same way he did when he measured Esvet's shoulders. To make matters worse, Esvet has dropped the bracelet on the floor and Dimitri is at the door. Also, Susie learned that Firuze was not a candidate for the agency. A flashback comes when Peyami and Dimitri were children. Dimitri's father wanted to give Dimitri a new foal for his horse, so he took Dimitri and Peyami to watch the horse being born. Unfortunately, Dimitri couldn't face the sight of the deed and walked away, forcing his father to give Peyami a foal instead. Dimitri was furious and the foal disappeared the next day. In our original timeline, Peyami recognized Esvet's dress size immediately, and now she recognizes it. Peyami is angry and Esvet has no choice but to ask Peyami to keep it a secret. As they talk, an assistant comes in and informs Peyami that Dimitri is in the living room. Esvet and Mustafa remain in the study while Peyami comes down the stairs. More chaos ensues when Susie arrives to warn Peyami that Esvet is not someone sent by the agency. Peyami tells Susie she'll take care of it later, but Susie insists until Dimitri hears from them. When Dimitri questions her, Peyami thinks it's a problem with the store clerk. When Lady Sulhan heard all this noise, she left. But when Dimitri greets them, he notices Esvet's bracelet on the stairs. His face turns sour and he asks Peyami. Peyami quickly stands up and admits that he flew when he measured Esvet. This seemed oddly persuasive to Dimitri. Dimitri even shamelessly goes to Peyami's studio to look at Esvet's wedding dress, but luckily Esvet and Mustafa manage to hide in the dressing room and remain silent the whole time. After all the hustle and bustle at home, Peyami and Dimitri finally set off to meet an English gentleman. The meeting took place at the ranch, and at the end of the meeting, Dimitri shows his father's second foal. The interaction is weird, but somehow Dimitri caresses Peyami's face that he won. When Peyami returns to his shop, Susie immediately asks him why he didn't fire Firuze. Peyami then admits that she already knew, but ends up asking more questions from Susie. Under the constant barrage of questions, Peyami yells at Susie to leave him alone at work. But even then his hands started shaking and he couldn't cut the fabric. Peyami then remembers how her grandfather told her to follow her heart, which helps her calm down. At night, Peyami returns home and is immediately greeted by Esvet. Esvet thanks for not revealing her secret. Peyami then tells her that she has to leave the house. He would make sure that she went to London to escape Dimitri. But there must be a secret between them. They looked at each other very closely during the conversation, and Mrs. Sullan is angry when she sees that something is going on between them. In addition, Madame Sullan has already found out Firuze's true identity. He found a photo of Firuze with a bracelet in Mustafa's room. Then Peyami and Esvet went to Peyami's workshop to finish the red dress. There they both kissed. While Peyami and Esvet were kissing, Madame Sullan looked behind the door. Then he left the couple unhappily alone. Soon Esvet and Peyami stopped and a man came to bring news to Peyami. Peyami then changed her appearance and went to live with a sick boy named Omer. Peyami posed as a man named Zia and played May with several other men, including the boy's father, Osman. The next morning Peyami went on a boat trip with Mustafa and Esvet, and the three had a great time. During her absence, Ms. Sullan met Dimitri's mother and Esvet's mother. He asked for a photo of Esvet to confirm that Firuze was Esvet. Meanwhile, Dimitri's father Ari showed Farooq his new office this morning. When Dimitri saw this, he felt it was unfair and confronted his father. But Ari just told Dimitri that he has plans and doesn't want Dimitri to know about them. Even angrier, Dimitri waited for his father to leave and peed on his desk chair. He then taunted Farooq before exiting the building. This, of course, made Ari very angry. That night he complained to his wife Leah about Dimitri's antics. She didn't know that Dimitri had already planted a bug in his parents' room. As Dimitri listened, Ari revealed an important piece of information: Esvet was involved in everything he owned. So they tried to marry Esvet to Dimitri. The stakes are now higher than ever. Then Dimitri collected his thoughts and tried to figure out where Esvet might have been. After much thinking and talking, she realized that Peyami had acted suspiciously the morning she found the bracelet. That same night, Peyami disguised himself as a poor man again and left. Fascinated, Esvet silently followed him to the car. Peyami entered the building, which appeared to be full of musicians. When he entered the room, people greeted him as Zia, and Peyami soon learned that the charity had decided to support Omer's treatment. Esvet tried to go around the building and eventually encountered Osman. He tried to ask about Peyami, but the man didn't know who Peyami was. Then he approached Zia and asked if he knew Peyami. Then Peyami was shocked to see Esvet there. Peyami offered to take Esvet public to look for Peyami so they could go somewhere private. Then, when they were alone, Peyami showed his true anger. He scolded Esvet and told her to go back to the driver. However, Esvet went to the audience and saw Peyami playing Ney. There is a woman in the audience who is said to be Peyami's mother. She was touched by Peyami's performance and shed a few tears. After the whole performance, the lady met Osman. Osman also advised her to find the child as he is looking for her. But the lady still hesitates. Meanwhile, Peyami met with Esvet to explain that she was trying to find her mother. He tried to approach Osman, but Osman was silent the whole time. Upon hearing this, Esvet commended Peyami for putting so much effort into finding her birth mother. That same night, a very angry Dimitri appeared at Peyami's looking for Esvet. It was his usual uninhibited self. Although Ms. Sullan claimed that Esvet was not there, the man searched the entire house. Of course, when Esfet and Peyami were out, Dimitri didn't find anything. Before leaving, he asked Madame Sulhan to deliver a message to Peyami to meet him at the ranch the next morning. When Peyami and Esfet finally returned, both received an audience with Mrs. Sulhan. Both were shocked to learn that Ms. Sulhan had known the truth all along. But Peyami always insisted on protecting Esfet. As Peyami approached, Ms. Sulhan reminded Esfet that she was indeed Mustafa's wife and that she should know what to do. Trouble at the ranch. The next morning, Peyami accompanied Esfet to the ranch. He planned to talk to Dimitri and then drive Esfet to the airport. So he went to the ranch alone to meet Dimitri. At first, Dimitri said he was willing to forgive Peyami if Peyami brought his fiancé back. However, Peyami asked Dimitri to release the girl instead. Angry upon hearing this, Dimitri confessed that he was the one who took Peyami's foal all those years ago because Peyami couldn't take what was his. Then Dimitri punched and kicked Peyami, although Peyami told him that he had not slept with Esfet. In his madness, Dimitri drew his gun and threatened Peyami. Then Esfet appeared with a gun and pointed it at Dimitri. Seeing this, Peyami stepped between them to stop Esfet from shooting his best friend. But things got even crazier when Dimitri kept threatening to shoot Peyami. During this exciting saga, Esfet shoots Dimitri with her pistol. Unfortunately, the bullet landed on Peyami's chest instead. He started bleeding and fell to the ground. Esfet was shocked. Dimitri also put down his gun and shouted for someone to help Peyami. They both watched as Peyami slowly began to close her eyes. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. Your support means a lot, and I appreciate your engagement.